Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day 431, May the 15th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alrighty, a lot of news to cover today. I'm going to try to get to it all. I don't know, it may be another 2-video day. I'll do the best I can. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to tax you guys with more than 30 minutes a day of my videos, but there's just so much to cover. So let's get started. Okay, so there's a story, and a lot of these things I'm covering today are actually catch-up ball. There are things I didn't get to the last 2 or 3 days because of the other major breaking news, and I just didn't have time, so we're getting caught up on some things we haven't talked about. Now, you all are aware, I'm sure, of the fact that Uncle Bob, the special executioner Mueller, indicted 13 Russian trolls and 3 Russian companies for being involved messing around in the 2016 elections. We believe that he did this because he thought they would never stand trial, because we cannot force them to come over and stand trial. So it was believed that, well, Uncle Bob, things were kind of slow. He was getting attacked in the media. He needed some reason to justify his existence in the investigation to keep the thing going. So he decided to indict 13 Russian trolls and 3 Russian companies. So he did that. Now, we all, of course, learned about that, and we all were getting a good laugh about the fact last Wednesday when we learned that two high-priced New York lawyers showed up to defend 2 of them Russian companies. And so we all got a laugh out of that, because that really threw a wrench into Uncle Bob's spokes. In fact, they weren't even prepared to move to trial with the case because they asked for a continuance. And the judge said, "No, why should it be a continuance? You're here, you filed the charge." I mean, usually it's a defendant asks for a continuance. In this case, you have the prosecution. They bring a case. The defendants show up to court, or the lawyers show up to court, and then the prosecutor says, we want a delay. The judge is like, didn't work that way. You brought the case. They're here. The case moves forward. So that's what happened there. Now, a lot of people think that was done because, of course, these lawyers want to take advantage of the opportunity to have this discovery process where they get to see when the government files you a criminal count against you. Your lawyers get to see the evidence that they're going to use against you to prosecute you, so they can prepare your defense. But you also get the exculpatory evidence. That's evidence that could clear the defendant. And of course, we know in the Flynn case, we know that the judge told Mueller to turn over all the exculpatory evidence to him, evidence that might clear Flynn. But because if you don't ask for it, they won't turn it over. But in this case, these 2 lawyers representing the 2 Russian companies said, yeah, well, we're going to move for discovery, and we're going to want the evidence against our clients, but we're also going to want the exculpatory evidence as well. So these are smart lawyers. They know what they're doing. They're very high-priced lawyers from a major law firm in New York. That's who these 2 Russian companies hired to represent him. Very much surprised Uncle Bob the executioner and his team. They were not expecting to see it, and we all got a good laugh out of that. But another thing happened, though. On Saturday, the transcripts became made available. And then on Sunday, I think it was, some reporters got a hold of the transcripts and learned that the 2 Russian lawyers, of course, told the judge, yeah, we're here to represent the 2 of the 3 Russian companies that Uncle Bob, the executioner, has filed charges against. Now, the reason why there's not a 3rd lawyer here to represent the other company is because the truth is, the company that Uncle Bob charged did not even exist at the time that the crimes were committed that they're alleged to have been committing. So Uncle Bob charged a company with crimes that they couldn't have committed because they were not even in existence as a company at the time. So this was made, this fact was made available to the judge based on what was in these transcripts. We learned about that. So these lawyers told the judge that Mueller's filed charges against 3 companies, one of which was not even in existence at the time that the crimes were committed, the alleged crimes were committed. So right off the bat, things are not going well for Uncle Bob. So what happened here? Well, my analysis of this is that if you remember what happened at that time, Uncle Bob had kind of hit a slow spot. He was taking a beating in the media and from certain members of Congress and center-right, right-wing pundits, people on me, other people. He's taken a beating out there. They needed something to justify him keeping his investigation going, to justify his even being relative, and to help the media have some more stuff that they could put out and chew on and use in their propaganda. Because keep in mind, a lot of what's going on here is heavily reliant on weaponizing information, propaganda, leaks about these investigations that Mueller's doing, and other things like this. So anyway, this is pretty much was a justification. So what Mueller and his team probably said is, hey man, we need something. We need something to, you know, kind of jazz this thing up a little bit and get us back where we need to be. We're kind of taking a beating. And they probably threw this thing together in a hurry. They put this case together in haste. And in doing so, Uncle Bob, the special executioner, and his Hillary donor posse, who look like Keystone Cops now, the headhunters, they obviously just overlooked something, made a mistake, and one of these three companies they filed charges against was not even a legal entity at the time that the crimes they're alleged to have committed happened. So that makes them look even more ridiculous. And my guess is that the last two times Uncle Bob's been in court, he's had a judge chew a hole in his shorts. My guess is that Uncle Bob and his team are about to get another hole chewed in their shorts. And something else too, you got to ask yourself, this is something else I don't hear anybody talking about, but it's crossed my mind immediately almost, so I'll go ahead and talk about it. Why would these Russians who own these companies even participate? Why would they spend all this money? Because these lawyers are not cheap. You're talking about lots and lots of money. You're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not getting into the $1 million range, depending on how long this thing plays itself out. Why would these Russians put out that kind of money to get these New York lawyers to represent them in a case where they know they don't have to do anything? I mean, they can't be extradited to the U.S. Putin's not going to force them to come over here. They don't have to even answer these charges. They can keep their money in their pocket. So why would they fork out this money? I mean, they don't care what Uncle Bob's conclusion he comes to. You know, if they don't show up and the judge rules, well, they didn't show up, you win the case. They don't care. It has no effect on them. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, the biggest thing that these guys fear, like all other Russian oligarchs and Russian companies, is that Congress will include them on the list of oligarchs and Russian company owners of Russian companies who are being sanctioned either individually, themselves, or their companies. And that could happen anyway. You know, that would be the only thing I can think of. It'd be why they would fight the charges. But largely, I don't think they would even care. So why did these owners of these Russian companies, these two companies, why did they fork over, and are they willing to fork over hundreds of thousands, if not running into $1 million or more, in legal fees to fight a case that they could never be held accountable for? It's just like flushing money down the toilet. Why would they do it? Well, here's what I think. I think that, you know, we didn't hear anything about this for a couple weeks. And I think that's because these guys had no intention of fighting these charges or even answering the charges or anything else. I think they probably laughed and said, well, let him go ahead and file charges and win the case. We don't care. It doesn't affect us. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But I think what happened is somebody close to Putin or high up in the Russian government probably paid attention to this and said, you know what? I know how the American system works. And, you know, in the American system, the defendants their attorneys get to look at the evidence against them as well as exculpatory evidence. And this might be a golden opportunity because, remember, this was an intelligence operation and a secret investigation that relied on the intelligence community to get the information to come up with the charges. So I think that probably some people close to Putin went to Putin and said, hey, you know what? We should pick up the tab for this legal case. Tell these two guys own these Russian companies, we're going to pay the fee. Let them go ahead and hire two lawyers. We'll reimburse them and let the lawyers fight the case and let them lawyers know that you do want discovery, you do want all the evidence against you and the exculpatory evidence as well. Because that means they have to turn over the evidence, which will include, you know, intelligence that will be, you know, from the intelligence community and how they came about doing this. It might even expose the fact that they really have no investigation or no case at all, that they just threw it out there with practically nothing to back it. They have no case, and it will embarrass the hell out of them. So either Putin, people around him decide to do it just to screw with Uncle Bob and the U.S. government and the Justice Department, proving that they have no case at all and they're going to look like fools, or because they want to force Uncle Bob and the U.S. government and the intel community to have to come off intelligence, which they might be able to gain something from. So I think that there's players in the Russian government that are probably behind this, wanting to see this case go forward. Not so much the two guys who own the Russian companies; they probably don't care at all. But I think that it's probably the Russian government, Putin maybe himself or others around him, that are saying, hey, let's take advantage of this opportunity to poke him in the eye. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. There's something that bothers me, and I hear this from time to time, and I heard it on Limbaugh's show the other day. And it was on a totally unrelated topic. It's about the topic of, Nixon and the plumbers and all that. Nixon had always maintained that he didn't know about the plumbers and the operation. This is bullshit, and there's so much evidence to prove otherwise. But apparently Limbaugh was repeating this, and I'm not just wanting to go out and attack Rush Limbaugh. I'm not a huge Rush Limbaugh fan. I don't love him. I don't hate him. I mean, I don't have much really. I occasionally listen, but he's not a hero of mine or anything like that. And I'm not trying to attack him. This is just something he repeats that other people have repeated over the years. But as you know, I studied Watergate intently, and the history of the U.S. government, the history of the intel communities, and all this. I've studied so much of this stuff that it's hard to trip me up on this stuff. And Limbaugh made a comment the other day, just kind of offhanded, I think, where he said, quote, Nixon didn't know about the plumbers. Well, the plumbers was the nickname for the guys who would fix leaks and fix problems. They were the guys who broke into the Watergate Hotel and got caught. But that wasn't their first break-in. They broke into the offices prior to that. They broke into the offices of Mr. Fielding. Mr. Fielding was a psychiatrist, and he was treating the man. One of the people he was treating, one of his patients, was the guy who leaked the Pentagon Papers, which were very damaging to the Nixon administration. And they actually broke into Fielding's office twice, successfully. So the plumbers broke into the offices of Mr. Fielding twice to get damaging evidence, to get the records from his client, to reveal the fact that this guy who dropped the Pentagon Papers was seen to shrink and might be crazy. That was what they were trying to do. So it wasn't the first dirty trick. Watergate break-in wasn't the first break-in, and it certainly wasn't the first dirty trick, and it certainly wasn't the beginning of the plumbers. As if they were, people almost make it sound like the plumbers were created to break into the Watergate. No. They were in business long before Watergate. In fact, they were in business long before Nixon was even elected. The origin of the plumbers began back even when Nixon first began to run for president in '68. What happened was Robert Kennedy was supposed to be the great hope for the Democrats in '68, but he was assassinated. And that left George McGovern and I believe the guy he was running against, I can't remember his name. What was his name? I don't think it was Humphrey. Humphrey was a Republican, I think. But anyway, there was two people running who were going to be running against Nixon. One was McGovern, and then the other guy. Now, when Nixon, at the very beginning, this is when he was running in his first term. Watergate happened as he was beginning to run for his second term. But all the way back to where before Nixon was even president, when he was putting together his very first campaign team to run for president in his first term, is when the plumbers were put together. They were first put together to make sure that Nixon ran against McGovern, because they had polls that showed that Nixon would destroy McGovern, which he did. He won in a 48-state landslide against McGovern. But the other guy that Nixon would have had to run against, if he won the Democratic primary, would likely have beat Nixon. So from the very beginning, when Nixon began to run for president, they put together the plumbers to do a destroy campaign on his possible Democratic opponent, who was someone who might have beaten him, because they wanted to make sure he lost so that McGovern would win, so that Nixon could run against McGovern. They wanted to run against McGovern. The plumbers were brought in to make sure that happened. And that's exactly what did happen. They did destroy this Democrat who was running against McGovern. They destroyed him, which allowed for McGovern to win the nomination of the Democratic Party. And then, just as was widely known or predicted, Nixon went on to win and destroy McGovern in a 48-state landslide. The Plumbers were active a long time before Watergate, or even before Nixon even won his first term as president. It happened as they were beginning to put together his first campaign. That's where the Plumbers originally got started. But once he won his first election and won in '68, then as soon, literally almost within a day or two after he was elected, they started talking about, it's in G. Gordon Liddy's book, where they're sitting around talking, okay, well, we just won the election, now it's time to get ready for 72. Let's go ahead and get the Plumbers busy working on this and this and this and this and this. And there's a lot of things that they were trying to do when they broke into the Watergate Hotel. Obviously, they wanted to plant bugs in the phones, electronic listening devices in the phones. But the number one thing that they were actually going for there, they had these really cool little spy cameras, which also gave away the fact that they were probably working for the CIA, because you couldn't go out and buy these things in the store. These really top secret little specially made cameras for the CIA. Two of the guys had these cameras on them. What they were hoping to get, one of the things, they were looking for quite a few things, but one of the things, the primary target they were looking for was apparently what was going on there at the DNC, the Watergate Hotel where the DNC headquarters were, was there was apparently they would bring in donors down there to come down there and donate money to the Democratic National Committee. In exchange for donors, they would feed them a real nice dinner in a hotel and accommodate them with a prostitute. And there was a madam who worked with them to provide the prostitutes. And there was a list. There was a list of Democratic donors who had taken advantage of these prostitutes. And apparently that list was somewhere there at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate Hotel, probably with the secretary or someone like that. So one of the things that they desperately wanted, that was the target of the break-in, this is according to G. Gordon Liddy, who ran the break-in operation unsuccessfully, is they were looking for that list of Democratic donors who had been set up with prostitutes in exchange for donations. The Plumbers were busy long before Watergate. And I find it very difficult to believe that Nixon didn't know from the very beginning about the Plumbers. I mean, that's just nearly impossible to believe. He might have denied it, but he denied a lot of things that weren't true. You know, these guys lie. Okay? Sorry, Rush, you're wrong on that one. Nixon knew about the Plumbers. Go back and read your history, sir. Okay. Another thing that's popped up. We talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago about these emails that were on the laptop of Anthony's wiener, and the fact that the Southern District of New York detectives, FBI and detectives, police detectives in New York, first are the ones who got a hold of this laptop of Anthony's wiener, which had all the damaging evidence that eventually got him convicted and sent to jail. But it also had all those State Department emails, which is what raised the red flags and which caused all the commotion, which they gave to McCabe, and he sat on for 5 or 6 weeks. Comey likely knew about it. Then they were forced to reopen the investigation because these same New York, Southern District of New York FBI and police detectives were threatening to go public and resign if in fact they didn't. So we were talking about all that. And but we were talking about the fact that would the IG get his hands on the laptop, the Wiener laptop. Well, it turns out, I don't know if he's got the Wiener laptop, probably not. But we do know that he has the State Department emails that were on it, because those emails that were on the laptop of Anthony's wiener were State Department emails that Huma had basically transferred over to that computer, which apparently was her laptop at one time that she used at home, but Anthony Weiner was using her laptop at home to do other things. And so that's how those State Department emails got caught up in all of this. Well, it turns out that when Horowitz was doing his investigation, a lot of the emails from the State Department, when they located them and they were made available to the Inspector General, those emails that are State Department emails that are on the Wiener laptop are part of these State Department emails that Horowitz was able to retrieve. So basically, Horowitz has the State Department emails that were on the laptop of Anthony's Weiner. Now, whether or not, and he probably doesn't have those other emails that are the stuff that Anthony Weiner put on there, and there may be some other stuff that Huma put on there that wasn't from the State Department, things that may lead to other more, nefarious activities. But as far as pure State Department emails that were on the laptop of Anthony's Weiner, Horowitz has got them, which might show pay for play. So that question is answered. Harry Reid has cancer. Harry Reid has cancer. And apparently it's a pretty fast cancer. He's had it for a while. We just learned about it today because he went for some sort of a treatment or a surgery actually today, and will be followed by chemo. It's not good for Harry Reid, and it's very similar to what McCain's looking at. It's a pretty quick acting cancer. So, but they think they got it early, but still he's pretty old, and we don't know. But the prognosis, I'm not sure. But it really doesn't matter unless you like Harry Reid. But what's interesting about this is it is coming right one day after another story that we covered yesterday. Yesterday, I told you this story popped up somewhere. I'm not sure who originated the story, but it was picked up by the True Pundit. So I'm going through the True Pundit, and I see this story, which says that that John Brennan, Mr. Potato Head, former CIA director, never gave his blessing to Harry Reid to release the contents of their secret conversation. Which, if you remember, again, this is stuff that was dealt with a year and a half ago and has been put to bed. I mean, it's not even things we even talk about anymore. But about a year and a half ago, a year and 3 months ago, we learned that, there was a secret telephone call where Brennan called Harry Reid and started telling him about, they believe, based on CIA's unofficial information that we're getting, that Trump and people on the Trump campaign may be colluding with Russians, and possibly even colluding with them in this hacking the emails and giving them to WikiLeaks. It was Brennan who picked up the phone and called Harry Reid in a secret conversation, is what we were told. And Harry Reid at the time said that he had Brennan's blessing to release all this information. Now, what's interesting about that is that, we get the story that pops up yesterday that all of a sudden says, wait a minute, John Brennan, sources close to the two men say that Brennan didn't give his permission. Well, who would be sources close to these two men, and why is it a year and 3 months later does a story like this just pop up out of left field, out of nowhere? No one's even talking about this. This is old news, man. All of a sudden it just pops up, and what's the only thing that's really meat and potatoes in the whole story? It's that Brennan, the only thing that's important is one sentence: Brennan didn't give Harry Reid his blessing to release this information. Why would that come up? And the fact of the matter is, who would know that? It was a secret conversation on the telephone. Brennan called Harry Reid. But now a year and 3 months later, all of a sudden somehow we just get this story that just pops up. It's just hard to believe. Someone, Brennan himself probably, or one of his lackeys, just leaked the story out there to try to put it out there. And it's just very funny that the day after that story hits, we learn that Harry Reid has cancer and probably is not going to be able to respond to anything, I guess, because he's now in this situation. So it's almost like somebody knew that Brennan knew that Harry Reid was going to be incapacitated, and so they dropped that story yesterday, knowing no one could follow up on it today. Very, very slick, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Potato Head, but we're on you, brother. We are on you, and you ain't fooling nobody, and your ass is going to have a lot of questions to answer for in the future. Now I'm running out of time, so I just want to let you know that I have a lot more to cover. Probably going to have to do a second video, but I'm not going to get the second video uploaded until later in the day. So this first video, the one you're watching now, will be uploaded at the normal time around 10:30 in the morning, and then there'll probably be another video to follow this later in the afternoon, probably around 2, 3 o'clock. And that's kind of what's going to happen, just based on the fact that I have so much more to cover and just no more time. So another 2 video day, it looks like. And that will happen tomorrow. So anyway, enjoy this video. A couple hours after this video, there'll be another one. Alrighty? Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in a little while. A couple hours. Bye.